evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming to another scholarly conversations tonight. My name is Dr. Servet Yatin, and I proudly serve as the Provost and Chief Academic Officer of Quincy College. Already in its third year, Scholarly Conversations continues to generate incredible energy and interest from outside and inside Quincy College. Tonight, I see in the audience many returning guests who have made Scholarly Conversations an important part of their lives. What makes Scholarly Conversations so exciting is its variety, as each topic brings with it new faces, and with it an opportunity to come together and demonstrate what Quincy College is about. Whether this is your first time or fifth, tonight you will not be disappointed. This evening's speakers are not only Quincy College faculty, but experienced professionals with knowledge of topics not just in the news, but in our lives. Technology is a common theme tonight, but as educators, our featured speakers are ultimately concerned with people. This evening, we will hear how new technologies can help us make decisions, be more efficient, and even overcome our biases. But we will also learn about some of the risks, and in doing so, it is our hope that these presentations will help all of us navigate this new world. Before introducing our presenters, I would like to thank the forward-thinking members of Scholarship Teaching and Learning team who established this event and time and again meet the moment with their choice of subjects and speakers. Members, please stand for a round of applause. I also want to thank President Richard DiCristofaro, who has not only supported Quincy College's growing baccalaureate programs along with others, but the outstanding faculty who teach in them, including tonight's speakers. Thank you for your support, President DiCristofaro. Now, a few housekeeping items. Please silence your cell phones for the remainder of the evening. Restrooms are outside near the entrance. And in case of emergency, please follow the red exit signs. Each session will be followed by a Q&A, and at that time, please don't hesitate to raise your hand when each speaker opens the floor for questions. And now for our first speaker. Whether we work in industry, in government, or in education, we face a common challenge. How do we find the right person for the job? How do we define the right person? Tonight, in Fairness and Inclusion, Dr. Tom Connolly will discuss how artificial intelligence can help employers reimagine the hiring process. Dr. Tom Connolly has been a faculty member in Quincy College's Bachelor of Science in Psychology program since 2024. Prior to earning his PhD in Industrial and Organizational Psychology from Adler University, Dr. Connolly earned a Master's in Public Health and an MBA in Finance and Behavioral Economics. In addition to teaching, Dr. Connolly is an entrepreneur, consultant, and a researcher on issues related to workforce, including equity, leadership, decision-making, and, as you will learn tonight, technology. Please welcome Dr. Connolly.
Thank you, Dr. Yatin, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening. In most conversations about AI, we think of it as the punchline. It is the thing. It has engaged our imaginations over the last year and a half or so because it's the thing that is actually making the decisions, and that's the way we often think about it. I want to offer a different perspective this evening, and that is to think about it instead as something that's more of a utility. It's woven into the fabric of a process, but it's not making the decisions. So it's more of a decision support tool rather than, as we see it, as a decision-making tool. It also, since it radically changes the way things are done, it gives us an opportunity. we can take a process that might have deep structural flaws, like the one that I'm going to talk about tonight, and by using AI to reimagine how we do that process, we can make it fairer, more unbiased. We can have better outcomes for organizations and for the people that serve them. I want to do this by sharing some research that my colleagues and I have done on how we take a process that's very familiar to all of us. That's the job search and hiring process in organizations. Let's start by looking at the industry that it serves. So modern recruiting, the way we think about it today, is a $206 billion industry. There are 46,000 companies whose sole purpose is to basically be the gatekeepers on institutional hiring. This is a large industry. It's the same size roughly as the cell phone industry, alcohol manufacturing, and the hotel business. It's equivalent to all of the medical premiums that we all pay in the United States every year, $206 billion. It's a set of meta networks built around these sectors and organizations and institutions that need to hire people. And the thing is, it's a process that's supremely resistant to change, and it's riddled with biases, heuristics, shortcuts that are basically there to fill in information gaps because of the process that we've used for literally hundreds of years. Now, this is consequential to all of us. We make 5.5 million hiring decisions a month just in the United States. We're only 4% of the global workforce. So if you extrapolate that, there are well over 140 million decisions made every month. So this process really does affect us all, and it affects, of course, the students that we are getting ready for the workforce. To give you some sense of how resistant to change this process actually is, this is the guy that's purported to have produced the first resume. Leonardo produced it in 1482. He sent it to the Duke of Milan. It was also the first time that someone gilded the lily on their resume. He wanted to emphasize his acumen as a weapons designer, as an architect, and as a civil engineer. He studiously avoided talking about the fact that he happened to have a little bit of artistic ability, and that wouldn't, but because he thought that the Duke wouldn't kind of go for that. Fortunately, Duke Ludovico went for it, hired the guy. Turns out he appreciated his artistic capabilities, and he commissioned The Last Supper. So Don Ludovico was the one who got him to paint The Last Supper, and it sits in Milan today. The process really didn't change for the next 500 years. But it was the same thing over and over again. And after World War II, the process industrialized. It got scaled, but it really was the same process. We needed to civilianize the post-war economy, and sadly, we also needed to disenfranchise the millions of women and minorities who had stepped into the breach in the United States, so that all of the service members who were coming home could have jobs. And so the recruiting industry really grew around this notion of, let's get servicemen back to work, and that meant displacing literally millions of people. We all know the drill, right? This is resumes and cover letters. It's sequential gating, so first you get to talk to a junior person, and then you get to talk to someone a little more senior and a little more senior. Ultimately, you get, if you make it there, you get to the person who's actually going to make the decision, and present company excluded. Usually the people that make those decisions are inexperienced. They have little or no training, right? They're trained in something else. They're experts in something other than hiring. And so they use a lot of like me bias, or frankly, like the last person in the job who was successful, that's my template for who I'm going to hire next. So these heuristics and stereotypes sort of fill in the blanks for people, and they become a major portion of kind of how we hire people every day. Now, the challenges of this process did not go out unnoticed by the civil rights movement. So in the 60s and 70s, the bulk of civil rights legislation was specifically aimed at fixing this issue, that there was so much overt bias and unconscious bias in the process that just desperately needed fixing. And so there was a great legal regulatory umbrella that was created around this that has actually made a profound difference. It's also created an industry of its own. So the DEI industry in the United States is about $16 billion a year. It's a bevy of corporate DEI staff, consultants, lawyers, technical people, technology platforms that are all aimed at assisting with this. And they basically have all followed the same recipe for the last 70 years. It's been a very effective recipe, but it sort of goes like this. Step one, get a workshop together and tell people about the illegality of overt bias and about their own unconscious bias, right? Step two, use the legislative umbrella to kind of add gravity to that workshop and to use moral suasion and other methods to kind of get people to take it seriously. Step three is sort of hope for the best, and step four is do it again. So it's been this approach of using content-based solutions, getting people to talk about their own unconscious biases as a way to help them make the process fairer, but it doesn't actually address the structural issues that go into the process that I mentioned about going through the drill and having that sequential gating and resumes and interviews by folks that haven't really been trained on how to do it. So what we did instead was, what I want to share with you today is some research that some colleagues and I have been working on for a couple of years. Basically, where we're trying to flip the script using AI to change the way people are hired. Now, as background, this started as a completely atheoretical exercise. A partner and I wanted to build a platform that would help biotech firms scale rapidly, so that we were not worried about equity and inclusion at all. We were worried about time to fill, finding niche scientific skill sets, and doing it very cost effectively. So we built this platform. We had our first customer. We spent about $1 million building it. And then COVID came along and our funding sources collapsed and we had to pivot. The pivot came in the form of Governor Baker getting on TV on a Friday afternoon and saying in 30 days we're going to have 2,000 people on a pandemic response organization that are going to help us with this. Contact tracers, case investigators, and caregivers. On Saturday, we got a call from a colleague at the Public Health Institute that was tasked with doing that. And they said, we don't have any idea what we're doing. Do you have any ideas on how we can get this done? And we did. We took the platform and pivoted it to being able to do this. And in 30 days, we had 2,000 of these folks up, trained, ready to go. And then we wound up doing it for 4 more states and about a dozen universities to kind of build these little armies of contact tracers to kind of help us through COVID. COVID settled down. We got a corporate sponsor. Thank you. It was a great experience. It was awesome. Now, we got a corporate sponsor after that because we now wanted to figure out how to civilianize what we had done. But we observed something. When we did it for contact tracing, one of the things that we were able to add value on, and it was something National Science Foundation took notice, they gave us a grant to kind of study why our process worked better, was that in Massachusetts alone, for example, our operations spoke 110 languages, including American Sign Language. It had 65 different racial and ethnic groups among the 2,000 people. We were able to reach out to every marginalized community that we could for the COVID response process. And that was very important because there was so much suspicion around we're the government, we're here to help you, and all of that kind of tension that happened with minority communities around kind of what are we doing with the government, even immigrant communities that didn't want to kind of participate, but we were able to get people that would help them do that. So that was the background, and basically we got a corporate sponsor afterwards that let us set up this extraordinary quasi-experimental design where they gave us control of their hiring process. And what we did was set it up so that half of the organization was being hired the traditional way. So that meant focus sourcing, right? Smile and dialing, going through LinkedIn, finding people, the usual thing that recruiters do. Then it went to interviews, then gated, kind of sequential gating to decide who was going to get hired. And then it's a very slow kind of manual process. On the other side, we had set up something that followed these 4 elements. First, algorithmic advertising, then multi-component assessment, then compensatory decision-making, and we tied it all together with AI for sort of robotic process automation so that the process would move very rapidly. So what happened was this. We took those elements, those 4 elements, and we hoped that based on what we had done with COVID, this is what we thought we'd be able to do for a company. First, algorithmic sourcing lets us reach every community, and I'll talk a little bit about how we do that. We wanted multi-component assessment to help managers kind of open the aperture on who could be successful in a role and see the whole person. Then we wanted to use compensatory decision making. So this is group decision making. The hiring decision maker has ultimate say in who gets hired, but we wanted even the most junior person to have input to that and to have that be a very sort of a dialogue-based kind of conversation. And then again, we used AI and robots to speed this whole process up so that it was the pace of it was radically changed. So let's go through each of those big elements and kind of talk about what they did. Algorithmic advertising, you've all experienced it. Have you ever had that creepy feeling when you look at something on Facebook or other social media and then all of a sudden you get an email for the thing, right? You look at a barbecue set and all of a sudden you're getting barbecue set emails on your, right? That's algorithmic advertising. The way that works is you target people who come to visit and then you follow them around. So what we were able to do was follow candidates that matched our profile, and we wanted to see where they go. So we'd start with the top job posting places like LinkedIn and Indeed. And then when somebody went away and went to some little esoteric Spanish-speaking site that was just for engineers or scientists, we would follow them there and say, oh, there's a population of people here that we might want to talk to. So we posted our ad there. If it was a Spanish-speaking site, AI would post our ad in Spanish. If it was a different job title but the same profile, AI would change the job title and put it to something that would resonate more with that community. So by doing that, we started with a few posts, but then over the course of about 2 weeks, it would spread to up to 10,000 different job posting sites around the country. We geofence it, so it was location-based and things like that, but it would let us get this huge reach. So what happened was we got to build this huge haystack of candidates that were very close to the people that we might want for the job, but it gave us this huge haystack. So now what we had to do was find the needles. So instead of using this interview cycle that we're all familiar with, we had first an AI resume assessment tool. And so we built one, and we very specifically built it so that it was called modified RAG. So retrieval augmented generation is a form of AI. But what we wanted it to do was not just found round pegs for round holes, we wanted it to look for adjacent skill sets. So we had tested this out, for example, with the Edison Institute. We worked with them on automotive technicians. We have 1 million automotive technicians in the country. We have no wind technicians. Can we figure out a way to take automotive tech, which is going to demise slowly as a profession, and figure out how to move people over to something else by looking at the adjacencies of those skill sets? So that's basically what we were doing here, was use AI not to just fit round pegs to round holes, but look for adjacencies that humans looking at resumes might not be able to pick up. We then had a very automated process of pre-qualifying questionnaires that asked basic technical questions and one-way interviews, which turned out to be very powerful. AI would look at the resume and then would ask 6 or 7 behaviorally anchored questions of that specific candidate, and they would just talk to their phone or their PC or whatever. It was a one-way video interview where the question was here and then they would talk. We found it was really great for reaching out to candidates, for example, like single moms. You could tell they were juggling the process of looking for a new job, because in the morning you could see they were doing it in their living room. But then they were doing the first question. The second question they were doing in their car on the way to work. And the last question they might be doing like 15 minutes after they put the kids to bed, and you could see it was nighttime and they were doing that. So it again reached more communities than we could have reached other ways. And then we had aptitude tests and writing samples and other things related to the job that AI would serve up depending on what the job description was and who we were actually looking for that position. So all of this got tied together with AI-driven process automation. So you all have experienced this process. You know how slow the response time is. You know how often people get ghosted or the process gets lost in kind of all of this confusion. We had a process where all of those assessments, our target was to get them completed in 48 hours or less. So every candidate got paid attention to, got constant feedback on where they were. They got a constant stream of emails and texts from a recruiter that was helping them get through the process. Of course, there was a catch. There was no human. All of those, and they weren't canned emails and texts, they were emails and texts that were written by AI as the person was going through the process. So we were able to maintain engagement and make sure that they stayed in the process. The other thing that it did was it helped us understand when people were getting lost in the process. So if they got lost, we would be able to reach out. A recruiter would be able to reach out as a human and deal with that. So, and then we use group decision making to kind of figure all of this stuff out. So at the end, we were able to ask 4 research questions, right? Can we generate a more diverse candidate pool? Can we generate more diverse hires? Can we generate more experiential diversity? We didn't want round pegs for round holes. We wanted more diversity in the experience base of this company. And can we keep traditionally marginalized candidates in the game longer? And here's what happened. We had 78,000 candidates that went through the system. If we compared the traditional model to the AI-supported model, these were the kinds of numbers that we got. We got very gratifying numbers on racial ethnic diversity, but we got even better numbers on participation in the process by veterans and by people who identified as disabled. Now that's nice, that's just the candidate pool, but what was really cool was this also changed the diversity in hiring. So hiring decisions that managers were making, they were able to kind of open up their minds to where the possibilities of a successful candidate would come from. And so we got these numbers on who we were able to attract and actually hire into the organization. We doubled the minority hires, and then in certain segments we got a huge lift. The 3% more male hires was interesting because this was an organization of 5,000 people, 70% were women. So even getting more males into what used to be called pink collar jobs was very important to us, so we were making some progress on that as well. Experiential diversity. We increased that by 13%. It's interesting how we operationalize that. We took an old AI model for resume matching. Those used to do the round peg, round hole things, right? So how tight is the fit between the person and the job? We used one of those, and what we actually wanted to do was see the score go down. So we actually hired with our AI supported thing, people that were less traditionally fitted into the job by about 13%. So we got that exchange of ideas and new perspectives in that we really wanted. And then lastly, our 4th research question, we got them to hang in there longer. Minority candidates are, they're notorious, they get told no a lot, right? So they prematurely often pull out of a process because if they see it's not quite going the way it might be, they're not gonna waste their time. They move on to the next one. So we found that with this process, we were able to keep them engaged and stay in the process much longer than we could with a traditional process. Through those 3 things. I'll skip that. Now, like most research projects, we created more questions than we answered, and it was sort of like squeezing a balloon. We hired a much more diverse workforce over 14 months for this company, but we found that managers who built diverse workforces for the first time have no idea how to manage them. So even things like overlapping holidays and differences in work practices and things like that became a challenge. So we saw in the first year of people being on the job, engagement levels went down, early turnover went up. So the sort of second round of this has been to fix that. The other thing they found though is there were new opportunities. This organization just 2 months ago went through its first big reduction in force, and we were able to turn the AI that we had inward on the company. 150 people were slated to be released from the firm. We used that same AI-based RAG model to find adjacent skill sets, and we saved 40 people. So we found jobs for them inside. They're about to do another RIF, and we're going to do the same thing for them. So we did find that there were new ways to do different kinds of decision support that hadn't been done before. And with that, thank you very much. Any questions?
How long did it take you to develop this?
It was about 18 months. So we built, and well, and sadly, we spent $1 million. You could do it today for about $100,000. Part of that was we were faffing about, we didn't know what we were doing, so we wasted money kind of figuring things out. Now that we know how to do it, and with so many new tools on the market, you can do it for 1/10 of what it cost us to build it the first time.
That includes your own training, like for example, AI is writing emails and
yes, all of that stuff, yeah. Because now it's so easy to ask the right question and the AI will give you the right answer, where we had to do that right from the outset. Jeff?
Just what about the, I guess I'm curious, the hiring culture, like the people having to get like a new paradigm and having to work with that. Was that difficult for them, or was there resistance? Not maybe overtly, but
actually, and I didn't mention it in the talk, but you just hit on the #1 finding that we had with this. You can duck that conversation. So rather than argue the merits of doing it the traditional way or doing it this way, you put this way in and they suddenly see that they're getting faster, quicker, more efficient hires, and so you don't have to have the polemic conversation about whether it's good or bad. In the few instances in commercial, in the few instances where we have had that, it's not gone well, because it's, hey, it was good for Leonardo, why isn't it good for us? Right? It was that kind of stick-to-itiveness.
Yeah. So how far did you track the turnover? Is it 6 months, a year?
We're still doing it.
You're still doing it?
Yeah, so we're 2.5 years out, we're seeing it come down. We don't know if it's us or the fact that the market is kind of contracting and people don't have the optionality.
Is there a lifespan for people in this kind of a position, like 5 years before they move on, or?
The whole company actually has about a third of all of their fills are done internally, so they have a very strong kind of internal ethic for career paths. So if you stay the first 18 months, you're pretty much going to stay for a career. So they're really keen on doing that. You got a question here?
I do. Are you considering other industries? Because I work in the sport industry, and I think that everything that you've talked about is something that pretty much most of the folks in our industry have to deal with.
Yeah. So I sold the company, and now a much larger company owns it, and they do it with insurance. This is still a client company that I'm talking about here, but we do it in sports, plumbing supply, and a big software company that just builds driverless car software. So it has proved its worth in different industries.
Are you able to share the name of the company you sold it to?
Oh yeah, it's called Kingsley-Gate. So if you look up kingsley-gate.com, it was Kingsley-Gate Partners, but that's the company that bought us. They're based in Ohio, but I'm happy to connect you with them. Yeah.
Are the people that get hired better at the jobs than the old way?
No. So because of the diverse skill sets that they bring, we've got to do some early training. So that's one of the things that managers had to get used to, is they had people with great potential, but they needed more training on the job. They had the smarts, they had the adjacent skill sets, but they needed to be focused a little better, and I think we've figured out how to do that. Yes?
I was going to ask how the people who were recruited felt about the process, dealing with the AI rather than a human.
It's a great question. Many of them didn't know. And so at the right point in time, a human was introduced, and ironically, it had the same name as the AI stuff that was coming out. We made sure of that. But there was a very specific age difference and level in the organization difference. The more higher the person in the organization, the more likely they were to be insulted by this process. Junior staff took to it very quickly, right? And by junior, I mean the first 15 years of their career.
Is that related to age, do you think, or as well the feeling of where they were in the hierarchy?
Yeah, I think it was more custom. They wanted to be respected more than this process. This process does feel a bit like a machine, and it moved very rapidly. It moved from application to hire, usually in 4 or 5 days, and they were not used to that velocity. They wanted to be deliberate about their own decisions, about their career, and so we do have trouble at the middle senior ranks with doing this.
But given time, that will.
I hope so. Yes. I mean, as this generation grows into that, I hope that they'll be as receptive to it. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Please know that you will have time to mingle with the speakers and ask some of those questions that you couldn't ask at this time. Dr. Connolly, I will never tell you whether you were hired by me or by my avatar. Yes, every day we get up and make decisions. Some seemingly small and trivial, such as what we eat or don't eat for breakfast. Others loom large by any measure, where we live, where we study, or who we partner with. Sometimes it feels like we have too many choices, and sometimes it feels like we have too few. For anyone, and that means everyone, who struggles with decisions, this presentation is for you. In her presentation titled Trouble Making Decisions, Learn from AI. Dr. Olga Lepsky will share real-life examples of decision-making with algorithmic methods. This presentation builds upon research conducted at Brown University, where Dr. Lepsky earned her PhD. We are fortunate that Olga joined us as a faculty member in our Bachelor of Science in Computer Science program last fall, bringing us immense experience as a researcher in the applications and implications of artificial intelligence. With that, Dr. Lepsky.
Hi, good afternoon. All right, so the title of my presentation, Trouble Making Decisions, Learn from AI. So making decisions, is it easy or hard? It really depends on many things, right? How big is the problem? What is the variety of choices? How old you are, like if you're a child, relatively simple, usually you ask the parent. But as we grow up, we have to do more on our own, and then it depends on your character, how decisive you are, how well you accept taking risks, and so on. I was wondering, in the audience, how many of you recall a different decision that you were agonizing about for some time? Like, okay, great. That means I'm not the only one, right? Because that's why I actually was interested in this topic. It is usually not so easy for me to make decisions, and I was looking for a way to apply logical approach or algorithmic approach to it. And here comes the words AI, artificial intelligence. It's basically ability of machines to think, right? And behind AI, most of modern approaches to AI are done via the field of computer science called machine learning, where computer or machine learns from data. And how does it learn from data? By following certain algorithms or models. So in my presentation, we'll actually look into problems that require our decisions and algorithms from machine learning field that help us to solve them. So very first one, it's the very basic, first algorithm that you learn in machine learning called KNN, or case nearest neighbor algorithm. And basically it's very simple idea, sitting at a table, ask around your neighbors and see what the majority says. With the data, it's like look at the data closest to you and see the majority of the answers and take it. So we could think of a new person sitting at the same table and asking the neighbors. Basically, the examples when we ask others for how they approach similar problem could appear in when we decide where to travel, when we select a restaurant, a physician, hairdresser, or even using social media, asking a group on Facebook how they approach the problem. And that's all nice and simple. However, it doesn't work if the situation is kind of unique to you. You don't want to share about it, and you want not just to ask another person, but figure out the right solution for you. So the first thing that you might be interested to do is identify the target. Like, do you want to take the fastest road to the place or the most scenic? What is your goal? it could be 2 targets. Usually it's more than 1, right? And in this case, let's say somebody who finishes school, decides on a major, and you know, intersection of 2 targets would work. Like, choose a major that is most interesting to you, but is also able to support you. So we look at overlap. However, often it's more than 1 outcome or 2 outcomes. It could be like a number of outcomes. And in this case, we use something that most of you probably have heard about it, like in statistics class, linear regression. However, how in that case linear regression would look like? The case in question, we look at comparing job offers. Let's say a person got 3 job offers and wants to compare them. So we look at some columns would be like criteria or parameters that we consider. In this particular case, what's important is interest, proximity of the job to your, say, place of residence, salary, work environment, skills that you will gain at this job, and prospects that it would give you, open before you. So then we decide to order. So job 1 to job 3, that is the ordering by interest, with 1 being the least, 3 being the most. And we go in each column and just basically order the best, the worst, and sometimes, as you see, 1 and 1, so about the same. So here, in salary, job 2 and 3 pay about the same, and job 1 is better. Then we decide on, after ordering in each column, we decide what is the most important to us. So in this particular case, a person that is making a decision thinks that interest, like how interesting this job is most important. And second thing that is important to him is the salary. And then the last, like kind of following that, all the other things like proximity, work environment, skills, and prospects. So 3 being the best, 1 being the least, and it could go like, it doesn't have to be 1 to 3, it could go 1 to 3, 4, 5, something like that. All right? And then what we do, and then we sum weights times parameter, and then plus another weight times another parameter, and doing this, product plus product plus product for job 1 yields 13, and similarly for job 2, 3 times 2 plus 1 times 2 plus weight times 1 yields 15, and the last job, this process yields 17. Which one would you choose?
Just 3.
Okay, wonderful, great job. You solved this problem. Okay, going on. That is another similar problem, deciding between public middle school and homeschooling. Figuring out like different pluses and minuses for each. Actually that is taken from a real situation. I was talking to a friend about her child really kind of struggling with school and considering homeschooling instead. So pluses and minuses in one column, pluses and minuses in another column. Notice that one of them has 2 minuses. Need actually to wait till homeschooling is approved. It's a long process. And we put 2 minuses here. And then summing up, getting 1 point here, minus 2 points here, what would you recommend to choose to that person? Yeah, going to school. All right, which was actually decided in that very real case. Great, so that is some variation of the same process with a table deciding between two options. Before, we were deciding between 3 options. What if we have a lot of options? Here is selecting from lots of options. So here we use another process, and that process was also applied when selecting which colleges to apply from the vast number of US colleges. So what we are doing, we are drawing a decision tree, but what is the way that we are drawing a decision tree? First, we start with the most important feature. In that case in question, the most important feature for parents was distance from home. And you split this feature, like could be reached in 5 hours, could not. And then you cross out whatever you want to remove, elimination. And then next feature, cost. And then cross out. And then next feature, whether GPA, SAT scores are close, relatively close to student score. And then you cross out if it's not. And the next feature for you is whether it has the right majors that the student is interested in. And you cross out. And then how big is the school? Depending on student priorities, small school was crossed out. So by going now via this path, in that situation where this decision was made, it was possible to just end up with 10 schools for considerations, 10 colleges to apply for considerations. So that is decision tree with elimination process to reduce number of options. And then you can go back to this table, which was also done when you have just a few options, and you need to select one. Okay, and a few more things, a few more scenarios. When you have risk associated with your choices, we are looking, advice is to look at average and worst case scenarios, which is done a lot in the field of algorithms. And basically then use eliminations for the choices with unacceptable worst case scenarios. And some examples are to decide whether you want to speed or not to get to some important event, right? Maybe thinking of a worst case scenario would make you eliminate the speeding, parking in the restricted area versus paid parking, thinking about what would happen to your car if it's stalled, right? And some other examples, vaccinating or not, deciding whether to evacuate if a warning for a significant storm is given. So that also, helps to eliminate choices. One more scenario. This is kind of the heaviest math slide, but don't worry, I'll explain. So, what is happening here? Let's say a person wants to pursue an ambitious goal and wants to estimate whether he, this person has a chance to get to this ambitious program. As an example, I taught at some point in middle school. And I taught computer science, but somehow half of my class said that they don't need to really study computers or math because they're all gonna be in NBA. They all dream of playing in the NBA. Half of the class, really, I think like it was mostly boys. Anyway, I even made a program for them to try to estimate the probability of a random person in a certain, group range to be in NBA. It was a very simple program, and it's actually probability for a random applicant to be accepted, right? Take all the, like men in a certain group, age group, and take how many people are playing in the NBA, divide one by another. Right, so probability is pretty low. However, what they told me, you know what, we are running really well and jumping really high, and anyway, we are very enthusiastic about it. We have a better probability than a random person. Okay, so here, how you could estimate it. You could actually follow what's called naive Bayes method, do some math, which I'm not going to show you, and say that probability that you accept that given that we have you with your exceptional qualities are accepted into this ambitious program, accepted, given it's you, is actually less or equal than general probability of being accepted divided by 1 over product of probabilities here of your exceptional qualities. So y1, y2, y3, it's like your exceptional talents, and what you can do that is actually considered to be attractive for this program. In the case of NBA, like running, jumping, shooting, right? But how we estimate how good you are? We actually look at the probability that a random person possesses this quality. Let's say I'm shooting really well. What is the, like in general, out of 10 people, how many people shoot that well? That is possible to estimate, right? Or out of, and so that way you estimate the probability of, that a random person possesses this great quality. And of course, if it's rare qualities, rare means this probability is low, means the probability, general acceptance probability grows, becomes bigger, right? So the approach is identify your exceptional talents and skills that make you attractive for the program, estimate the probabilities that a random person possesses these qualities, and that's how much you can increase the general probability for a random person to be accepted. And kind of estimate how likely that you will end up in the NBA, in Harvard, and somewhere else where you want to be. Okay? And decide based on that. And the almost last slide with less of math than before. Reinforcement learning used for decisions on action while interacting with another person. So up to now, we only looked at the slides that you're considering your own decision. Should I do this or that? Should I try to get to MBA or not? Now, what about when you are working with someone else? When you talk to a child, right? For example. So I have actually 2 children. The oldest was pretty easy and obedient. The second one was not at all. I was basically at some point really trying different things. And then I actually was, as I was learning machine learning, I actually learned about reinforcement learning techniques, which is used by machines for playing games, for chatbots, for portfolio management, robotics, personal healthcare, and is based on actions done by a system and rewards and penalties coming from interacting of the system with an environment. So basically, let's say playing chess, you move your figure, and does your situation improves or not? Right? Let's say it improved. Okay, so next time you do something similar along this line, if your situation does not improve and you lose your queen, so next time you won't be doing that. Your system, your machine learns how to play chess. And it's not just chess, it's video game characters learn how to act like that. So, going back to parenting, each child is different. His behavior could differ in different time, right? Depend on different age. Try to observe, like that's what I discovered for myself. If I try to like kind of record and observe which of my past choices produced like positive outcomes and which produced negative outcomes, meaning like significant resistance or even conflict, right? And basically adjust my actions every time to follow what works and not to follow what didn't. Then, eventually we have a better like understanding and relationship. All right, so applying reinforcement learning, in short. And very last slide, basically, here we discuss the following problems. Solving problems already faced before, key and then algorithm. Simple problems with one or two outcomes, identify the targets, if more than one, look at the overlap. Problem with several outcomes, do table with parameters and weights, comparing sums like linear regression, selecting from a vast list of options, decision tree with elimination, considering risky actions, consider average and worst case scenario, eliminate possibly based on the latter, decide whether to pursue an ambitious goal. We used estimate of probability of your acceptance to the program, but first, after identifying your exceptional talents and skills that make you attractive for the program. And last, we looked at decisions on actions when interacting with another person, and we used reinforcement learning there. So that's basically it. Thanks to DiFalco for cooperation on this project, and to STL team and Provost Yatin for inviting me to do the presentation, and to Laurel Kornheiser, Liz Lee, STL team for working with me on this presentation. Thank you very much. Any questions?
I have one.
Mm-hmm.
So now that AI takes over your parenting, do you have more free time?
Okay, does it require an answer?
Not really.
Okay, thank you.
How do these results compare to a control group that just makes gut decisions with no deliberation? It's a
Great question. And me and DiFalco considering to do this study, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
You can participate.
I'm good at gut decisions.
No, we actually kind of want to interview students about the decisions, hard decisions that they agonized about, and then how they could apply some of these methods and whether that made it simpler for them or could in the future make it simpler for them. So that's actually a very good question because, yeah, gut decisions, that's the usual way to go, but it's not always ideal, and very often it is listening to someone else. That's basically what I was working against. Like when somebody authoritative tells you, I know how to do, I'll tell you. And you being like a nice person, okay, well, he knows. Right? And then you made the wrong decision because he actually didn't know. Okay, more
I'm
questions?
curious about the probability question that you had with the MBA. What did you come up with? What was the result?
No, see, that's a great question. Here, it wasn't like about the result really, but about the way for, like, let's say you want to play in the NBA.
Yes. With
Here
lots of talent.
is
With lots of talent.
absolutely
With lots of
right,
talent.
with lots of talent, right? So you follow this process, identifying your talents and skills that make you attractive to the program, estimating the probabilities that a random person possesses these wonderful qualities, and seeing how the probability goes up. Let's say it becomes from, I don't know, 1%, 2%.
Right.
Okay, and then now use this, or maybe it becomes 50%. So then you can use that to decide whether you really need to hope for that and stop, like in my case, in middle school studying math and computers and English and all, and really count on getting into NBA or not.
So I need a copy of that formula, because we have lots of young people who are making bad decisions. And they're making those bad decisions because they see television and they don't see all of these other items. And
I agree. So even from kindergarten, the kids are told, even preschool, I think, when my son came back to me and said, "We could be what we want to be," and that is great slogan, right? However, in my case of middle schoolers, that was a little detrimental for them, So it's good to estimate. No one will make a decision whether you want to pursue that, but at least you will have a little bit more informed decision.
Yeah, just more of an observation than a question. The linear regression part that you had earlier, it's interesting how there's an analogy with that in decision making in the moral context, in ethics. Bentham developed a utilitarian school of thought where he went through pretty much a similar type of approach that way, where proximity was one of the criteria. I think there were 7 criteria altogether. Bentham, that's right, founder of utilitarianism, And he went through the process just like you went through there, and added up the totals according to the different factors, which would then determine the rightness or wrongness of an action.
So rightness, wrongness.
Yeah, in the context of ethics, obviously.
Yeah, I think that is definitely not extremely original, but it's nice to know how you could apply that, right, to making choices, and that it really could help all that, It really take emotional anguish from you and let you kind of figure it out on a piece of paper with a table.
This is also an approach that is very often used when rating abstracts for acceptance for conference, for instance. When you have a whole list of these criteria and novelty and conciseness and all that stuff, and then you basically put together the sum.
Any other?
Are these numbers self-assigned?
Yeah.
And so how do you, because some people have a better understanding of themselves than other people do when they assign values to things. It's the problem with the Myers-Briggs test. You know what I mean? So how do you, is it just for more dimensional thinking in general, right?
Well, here you just basically rate on one column, let's say salary, right? So where here it's like a little bit less, here it's more.
Yes.
So it's not like scale, it's just like ordering, right? This is less, this is more. Here, this is less, more, more. All right, so it's kind of not that easy if you break it into this. Not that hard, I meant. Not that hard if you just look at one aspect. Like, it's harder if you just compare those jobs, right? But it's easier if you look at each column. Just order.
Thank you, Dr. Lepsky. Just one question. Did you use linear regression to accept the offer of Quincy College? All right. Are we ready for the next one? Great. Imagine if we went back in time 15 to 20 years. some of you were babies, so you are excluded. 15 to 20 years. Imagine an evening like this one, scholarly conversations, the room, the people, the technology. While some things would be the same, there would be one important difference. Any guess? The utter absence of smartphones. Bravo. Today, smartphones are ever present in our lives, and with them, instant digital communication, 24/7 information and misinformation, numerous social media, and everybody's favorite, emojis. With those, we can conveniently express our happiness, delight, anger, surprise with just one or two keystrokes. But we are learning more and more that it is not without risk or consequence. Our last speaker this evening, Dr. Carol DiFalco, will bring us her recent research on the impact of digital environment on the development of young people. Through her presentation titled Generation Scroll, Raised by the Internet, Anxious by Design. As a college serving many young adults, and for all of you with young people in your lives, I'm certain that this topic is timely and relevant. A licensed mental health clinician, Dr. Carol DiFalco earned her PhD in counseling and psychology from Lesley University. And since coming to Quincy College last year, she has played an important role in our growing Bachelor of Science in Psychology program by supporting students not just as psychology majors, but as emerging researchers. With that, please welcome Dr. DiFalco.
I just need to work on my jump shot to increase my probability. That's what I'm thinking. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Let's just think for a moment here. A thumbs up if you've heard something so far this evening that has broadened the way you think about the topic that you are hearing. Yeah? Okay, this is good. This is fun, yeah? Okay. Let's take a moment to think about the last time that you felt anxious about entering a room full of strangers. That flutter in your chest, the racing thoughts, the uncertainty. Now imagine that feeling more often than not when you need to connect with others. For many emerging adults today, this isn't something that they need to imagine. It is something that is a part of their reality. I'm Dr. Carol DiFalco, as was mentioned. I'm a mental health clinician and a psychology instructor here at Quincy College. And today I'd like to explore with you the intersection of anxiety, digital connectivity, and community building among today's emerging adults. My research examines how these elements interact and influence the ways that young people create meaningful connection in our increasingly digital world. Every generation inherits circumstances not of their making. The silent generation navigated post-war austerity. Baby boomers grew up under the shadow of nuclear threat. Gen Xers, we were the latchkey kids of working parents. And millennials came of age during the economic recession. And now we have Gen Zers, the very first generation that is raised entirely immersed within the digital revolution. They have inherited a world of unprecedented connectivity alongside unprecedented rates of rising anxiety. As humans, we are inherently social beings, wired for connection and community, and this fundamental aspect of our nature has never changed. What has changed is the environment in which I tried to do my homework because it's finals week, and I was afraid I wouldn't get all of the words out for you. But what has changed is the environment with which that social wiring must operate. The digital revolution, for all its benefits, has created a massive barrier that this generation must navigate in no ways that previous generations had to confront. The result is a striking contradiction, that they are simultaneously more connected than any previous generation, yet experiencing more isolation and anxiety.
This is a paradox worth thinking about. So for these young people aged 18 to 29, the challenge comes during a critical developmental stage where they're establishing their identity and sense of belonging. So my research asks, how do emerging adults, ages 18 to 29, experiencing anxiety, create social connections and build community belonging when the very tools designed to connect them often create the barriers to authentic connection? Let me share with you what one participant, Jason, had to say. There are some people that I completely have digital connections with. I knew maybe back in high school, and it's not even a very personal thing. It's just someone who I can talk to about the movies I like or something like that, sports, whatever it may be. What's interesting here isn't that Jason is rejecting in-person connections, but rather that he's describing a spectrum of relationships. His digital friendships serve a specific purpose. They are intentionally less deep and focused on shared interests like movies or sports. These lighter online interactions provide a valuable reprieve from the social pressures and anxiousness that he experiences during higher stakes interactions. He's not substituting digital for physical connection, but rather supplementing his social world with different types of relationships that serve different emotional needs. So to explore this phenomenon, I've designed and implemented a qualitative study with emerging adults, 18 to 29-year-olds, who self-identify as experiencing anxiety. Participants are not required to have a clinical diagnosis, although some do, but rather the lived experience of anxiety in social situations. At this point in my research, I've completed and analyzed about 50% of the planned interviews with additional data collection and analysis over the next coming months. So my research uses an interpretive phenomenological analysis, IPA, which is a qualitative approach designed to understand how people make sense of their major life experiences. Unlike quantitative methods, which might tell us how many young adults experience anxiety, IPA helps us understand what that anxiety feels like and how it shapes their lives. Think of IPA as a deep listening process, one that unfolds in 4 stages. First, I immerse myself in each interview, listening, transcribing, reading those transcripts multiple times to understand the whole experience, similar to reading a novel cover to cover before you analyze its themes. Next comes a detailed analysis where I note not just what was said, but how it was said, examining language choices, metaphors, and emotional cues that reveal deeper meanings. Then I identify emerging themes within each interview, looking for patterns in how participants experience anxiety in social situations. Finally, these themes are connected across different interviews to uncover shared experiences and honoring individual differences. This approach also requires careful researcher reflexivity. I must continuously examine how my own assumptions and experiences influence my interpretation of participants' narratives, ensuring that the findings genuinely reflect their lived experiences rather than my own preconceptions and about anxiety in community building. So what makes this approach particularly valuable for this ongoing study is its ability to capture the nuanced, authentic experiences of navigating anxiety in community contexts. As I continue collecting and analyzing data, these preliminary themes may evolve, but they already offer compelling insights into how these young adults are adapting to their unique social landscapes. They aren't just data points, they are human stories that will continue to inform our understanding as the research progresses. So, from these interviews so far, 4 primary themes have now emerged. Anxiety's impact on social connection, the intentional community building despite anxiety, digital navigation in community building, and redefining community in adulthood. Let's explore each of these a bit more in depth. First, we found that digital platforms serve as what many participants called rehearsal spaces for social interactions. Think of it as a practice arena where they can test their social skills with lower stakes. Mary described this perfectly. I think it's interesting because social media gives you an idea of what you're getting or who you're getting in advance. It's almost like reading the back paragraph on a book before you decide to read it. What's happening here is a strategic self-disclosure. So testing the waters online before risking in-person vulnerability. Participants create structured entry points to communities through digital gateways and set boundaries by using digital tools to control the pace and intensity of social engagement. The second theme reveals how these young adults are developing sophisticated anxiety management techniques before, during, and after social interactions. David's experience highlights this intentional approach when discussing why he chose to take a public speaking course. I need to get better at it. You know, not like avoid it, because I know that avoiding it is impossible. Case in point, we're all here tonight, right? It's going to come up in my life. It's a practical skill that I will need, so I think I just got tired of living with it or trying to avoid it. Here we see vulnerability as a calculated risk. Participants making conscious decisions about when and how to be authentic with others. They are creating what I call anxiety safety nets that make connection possible despite their fears. Of course, there are some significant barriers that emerging adults do face. In my conversations, I've discovered that they face significant barriers when attempting to build meaningful communities. Many described falling into avoidance cycles, only to reinforce their isolation, like Heather, who found herself retreating further after each uncomfortable social interaction until she barely left her apartment for weeks. Others shared stories of misinterpreting social cues that led to withdrawal. One participant described obsessing over a brief interaction with a classmate, convinced that the person's quick exit meant rejection, when in fact they were just simply running late to class. Perhaps more poignantly, almost every participant expressed a profound fear of rejection that prevented experiencing healthy vulnerability. As David put it, it feels safer to keep everything surface level rather than to risk sharing something real and getting hurt. These barriers don't exist in isolation. They interact and reinforce each other, which creates complex challenges that require equally nuanced strategies to overcome. As Jason explained, I've been anxious long enough to know that I shouldn't be somewhere where I'm uncomfortable unless I'm with somebody that I'm comfortable with. Luke shared his struggle with confidence. My biggest barrier right now is my lack of knowledge and my lack of confidence. I need to find a way to increase my confidence because it's holding him back. And Heather revealed a common pitfall. I became really codependent. I would hang out with him all the time, and that became my coping skill to manage her social anxiety. Emerging adults forge resilience by cultivating self-awareness and then gradually venturing into social encounters with increasing confidence. They strategically blend online and in-person interactions, using digital spaces as bridges while nurturing meaningful face-to-face connections, creating a personalized pathway to community despite anxiety's challenges. Mary, for example, leans into the anxious experience and normalizes it. She says, I became completely codependent and would just chat with him constantly, letting myself feel anxious without pointing at it, almost like highlighting the fact that I was anxious made me feel better. Heather described her journey from digital to in-person connections. I think the baby steps towards actually meeting in person was helpful. We were texting a lot, then we started FaceTiming, and then a week later, we were like, okay, let's go somewhere. David embraced a head-on approach. a type of self-led exposure therapy. Just putting myself out there like exposure therapy, just really forcing myself to go into something that I'm not comfortable with. I'm going to learn from it and eventually get better at it. And perhaps one of my favorites. Jason highlighted the importance of authenticity. I know how important it is to be yourself and to be who you want to be. So I just hope that people around me can feel that energy I'm giving off, and they can find that within themselves. So what's notable about these strategies is that they reveal how these young people are actively seeking connection, belonging, and purpose within their communities. And this is crucial because this feeling and sense of purpose is a natural serotonin booster, right? It's the anti-anxiety remedy that's hardwired into our biology and psychology. So where do we go from here? What does this all really mean? Based on the data analyzed so far, the implications are relevant across several domains. Theoretically, this research challenges our hegemonic binary thinking by showing how emerging adults navigate online and offline spaces as integrated community environments. It reimagines anxiety as a developmental catalyst of self-awareness rather than as a barrier. And finally, extending our current framework of identity formation by revealing how anxiety influences community choices and identity construction. Practically, these findings can inform mental health practices by integrating digital physical approaches to social anxiety interventions. Community organizations could use anxiety-conscious spaces with gradual engagement pathways in their design processes. And higher education could implement targeted support during critical transition periods, both in and out of the classroom. This evening, I'm hoping that you're considering 3 core concepts. That emerging adults are actively developing innovative strategies to connect despite barriers such as feelings of anxiousness. That community building is an intentional process that requires specific skills and is worth doing. That there is a need for integrated support, recognizing both digital and in-person realms. So what's next? This research journey is still unfolding. Over the coming months, I'll be collecting additional interviews and analyzing emerging patterns that they fold. With particular interest, though, in how anxiety manifests differently in community formation across cultural contexts with varying digital adoption patterns. Even these preliminary findings point to something really quite interesting: the resilience and creative adaptability of this generation in navigating an unprecedented social landscape. Before concluding, I want to express my profound gratitude to the participants who generously have shared their experiences with me. Their willingness to be vulnerable about their anxiety and community building journeys has been really quite inspiring. I'm also deeply thankful to Taryn Geary, Kaylee Umbria, and Jamie DeLuca, 3 Quincy College psychology volunteer research assistants who have been helping with interview transcription and preliminary coding. This work would not have been possible without their concerted efforts and love of learning. Every generation inherits unique challenges not of their making. And for today's emerging adults, some who are here, this challenge involves building meaningful connections in community amid rising anxiety and an increasingly complex digital environment. Yet what strikes me most in this early data is not their struggle, but their innovation, their development of strategies, their willingness to take calculated social risks, and their determination to seek communities that accommodate both their digital fluency and their humanness as our central need for belonging. I would love to invite you into this conversation and end with this question to let you ponder. So based on what you've heard today, what is one way that you might adapt how you connect with and or support the emerging adults in your life? Thank you.
Yeah, 2 things come to mind in your effects on anxiety. I'm curious about your opinion. The first is
Yeah, so working from home, Dave, and online classes?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So what's so interesting is that the work from home model, many people jumped on it, right? And I think that what we're seeing from the data that we can gather from this sort of COVID influx decision is really that if you were older, right, if you were already established in your career, you had a higher success rate of working from home. But for younger people, early in their career, recently out of college, right, that's a huge ask because there's so many social norms too that come with community building in a workspace, and you're removed from that, and then you're left to really think about, you know, measure your own sense of belonging, right, by some metrics that may not actually be accurate. So it's interesting that, I'm not going to say that younger people don't want to work from home. I think that that's a very true thing, that some people really want to work from home. But if we think about, is that really a great suggestion for the Gen Zers? Probably not, right? Because they really want to also be together, right, and have the sense of community.
I think also, since you brought that up, if you're at an actual job site, then you're learning things by being around other people. If you're at home, you're isolated.
100%, 100%. And all the unwritten rules.
Yeah.
Like, remember the unwritten rules of high school?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you knew all the really important things, like be on time, blah, blah, blah. But you didn't know, like, you know, the unwritten rules of the hallway. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Jeff?
I just, I was curious with the in real life, the IRL versus the digital. Like, there's an assumption that the in real life connections are automatically better, like, or more meaningful might be the better. Was that something that the participants brought out, or that you went in going, let me show that? I'm just curious, who decided that that's a better environment, or I don't, you know.
The word better really wasn't.
I don't mean that, but or what the desire to the anxiety,
Yeah, but that's really great. But the word necessarily better wasn't a thing, but I really appreciate what you're saying, because you're getting to something that I didn't really mention, which is how you craft a series of questions, right? Question makers in the room. How you craft a series of questions, it's obviously going to have bias in your questions, right? Like, that's an owned thing. And then there's an interpretation of what those questions mean. Yeah.
But there's also the bias of in person is better than online.
Absolutely.
Versus the other way, because sometimes that dilemma is, that's what I have with younger people is, no, I'm arguing in person is better.
Yep.
They're arguing digital interaction.
But that's the interesting
better,
part.
I don't, you know, more conducive for communication.
100%.
However you want to say it.
Yeah, I think
making connections.
Making connections. And I think that what we're really hearing is that sometimes, if you're an older folks, right, we have a bias that leans towards, oh, young people just love being online. That is not a fair bias to make, because not everyone does. But what we're seeing is that we created a world in which the assumption would be they will have a huge online presence. But yet, we kind of like left it in the backdrop that, oh, when we connect in person, that's an automatic human thing, everyone does that. But it's not necessarily playing out that way. And that's not fair of us to put on young people. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah, assumption was the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
I think what I'm hearing as I listen to you guys talk about this is that we go into this assuming, and as I process what you were saying, we go into it saying this is a gradient of relationships, right? And so toe in the water, a little bit more digital, and then finally we think of it that way. As you talk to students, are you seeing that gradient, or is it more compartmentalized? Like, they have very specific kind of, we want to be this to these people, we want to be that with these people, and we're very comfortable, and we don't make a qualitative distinction between a digital and a face-to-face. They're just, that's the way it is. It's not a gradient at all. How are they processing that?
I don't want to speak on behalf. I'm just going to note that there are several students in the room who might have a comment about that. Anybody have a comment?
Can I hear the question?
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you, as you process this data, do you see it as a gradient that people are moving down, that they see digital as safe, and then as they're willing to take more risk and be more vulnerable, they move to something that's closer? Or is it a complete compartmentalization of things where you say, I have a great set of digital friends and I have a great set of face-to-face friends, and I'm equally safe with both. And it's just, that's the nature of those relationships. Where we were born without a digital kind of framework, we see it as, oh, those things are better, right? We're gonna move to personal relationships.
Me personally, I really dislike social media, so I may not be the best person to ask. I love being in person. I love in-person classes. That's how I perceive it. That's like my thoughts on it.
I think you should interview people like this guy to learn, to get strategies, so that they can teach the people with anxiety how to behave.
Yeah, it's so great.
I'm a junior, I'm a rising senior at Endicott College, actually. Sorry. I agree that I have no interest. I don't have interest in digital conversations. When I graduated high school, I unfriended most of the people that I didn't actually really talk to because I thought there's no point in us pretending to talk to each other. We don't talk to people that are not friends. But I also wouldn't consider myself the typical Gen Z-er.
And that's kind of interesting though, because I hear what you're saying a lot. And I don't think that older generations think of it that way. I think we can make broad, sweeping generalizations that if you're under 30, you must like live online all the time. Yeah, absolutely. What do you have to say?
My thoughts aren't really on what is better. I think more about what's more accessible and what feels better. And I feel like I was going to ask a question about the thoughts about dopamine on it too. Because I feel like going online is so much easier. You get so much more gratification. You see people doing amazing things and traveling and doing this and that. And I feel like our younger, like my generation sees that and feels that, and it's so much more. It's easier to go online and see your dreams rather than going in person, meeting with people, and trying to actually achieve those things.
Yeah, there's less friction involved, right? And also, there's a lot of assumption making around all the nuanced little steps that, how would I actually have that conversation with so-and-so, and what do I need to ask? Yeah, these are like steps along the way. Joe, Matt, what do you want to say?
Yeah, so I was thinking how these younger people like perceive themselves or how they felt about the anxiety they get from being on social media so much. And then I was wondering how you view like a lot of times subsequent generations will be like shift dramatically towards something that like in previous generations. And I was wondering if you foresee that, or like you think social media be such a concrete thing that will endure.
No, I think it's like there's a total shift. In 2011, it was very common in my waiting room, people would read a book, right? There were lots, remember the magazines that would be all over the offices, people would like them through? And literally within 6 months, people were on their phones, right? Like it happened so fast. And those folks were not 10 years old, they were 50, 60 years, right? So to your point, of course, older generations are kind of modeling down. Matt, do you have a thought? And then I think we have to wrap, because Dr. Yatin's give me the...
I was thinking about like I kind of just like the fact that people my age, my generation, like they also like want to be online and just really all they want. But I feel like my perspective for like the anxiety that people want is not just how much they use it or like what they use it. But I feel like not like really like my generation really like don't like social media, but like I feel like a lot of it starts from the top, and I see a lot of like adults and like people that I feel like I should be looking out to, like on their phone every day, like getting information from like fake sites that I feel like we feel that's imposed on us now.
Right.
Even though we don't like it, we feel like we have to be glued to it because of the people that would be like directly also using it.
That's a great note for us to end on, because that calls attention to that we all have ownership in how we create community, how we organize and invite and have meaningful connections that way. I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. DiFalco, and thank you, your research assistants.
No, no, they're not here.
They are not.
Actually, but
right. Thank you so much for your comments. I think that was, we got great insight from you, and you get a pass. And just hold a pass for one time. All right, before we all adjourn to the refreshments, please extend one more round of applause for our presenters, Tom and Olga. Also, please join me in thanking staff from throughout the college, including the library, IT, academic and executive support, marketing, and facilities. Their hard work and organization made this evening possible. Thank you. We are now in our third year of scholarly conversations. Each year is different, and we are grateful that Quincy Access TV is here to record these wonderful events and make them broadly available. Quincy Access TV, by being here tonight, you are playing a unique role in documenting and preserving Quincy College history. Thank you for your support for college's events, not just tonight, but throughout the year. Thank you. Last but not least, to all of our guests this evening, students, faculty, staff, alum, and community members, thank you so much for taking the time to join the conversations tonight and serving as the ambassadors of Quincy College in your communities. Please continue to spread the word about Quincy College. Thank you all for coming, and see you next time.